Among all the holistic physicians in the world, the name Dr. Max GERSON stands out. Dr. GERSON's basic concept for the prevention and healing of disease is to support the body's immune response system, thereby restoring the body's healing mechanism. Born in Germany in 1881, Dr. GERSON first developed his therapy in an effort to cure his own migraine headaches. After recommending his nutritional regimen to other headache sufferers, he discovered that his therapy was also successful with tuberculosis, asthma, arthritis, diabetes, and other chronic diseases. He first received worldwide acclaim in the 1920s for his success in treating tuberculosis with this therapy. Max GERSON's legacy to the world is his concept and formula to heal and prevent our pollution-induced degenerative diseases. The Nobel laureate Dr. Albert Schweitzer wrote,
Dr. Gerson ist für mich einer der hervorragendsten medizinischen Genies.
I see in Dr. GERSON one of the most eminent geniuses in the history of medicine. Many of his basic ideas have been adopted without having his name connected with them. Yet he has achieved more than seemed possible under adverse conditions. He leaves a legacy which commands attention and which will assure his due place. Those whom he cured will attest to the truth of his ideas.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Charlotte GERSON, and I will talk to you about the GERSON therapy. It was developed by my late father, Dr. Max GERSON. He was a trained physician, regular MD, and the only thing that really set him apart is, first of all, that he had an inquiring mind, but most of all, the fact that he had terrible migraine headaches. By the time he was 25 and passed internship and residency, he was sometimes ill 2 and 3 days out of the week, having to lie in a darkened room, unable to function. And he asked his professors and doctors and teachers and asked them, what am I going to do? And they said, well, look at your books. It says there's nothing to do, there's no cure. You're going to feel better when you're 55. But I'm 25 and I can't function. And he decided that since there was apparently no help, he would have to find his own way. And it set him off on a long search. There was no guidelines or anything. And he tried all kinds of things, but he finally found a paper somewhere in Italy that was reported a woman who had changed her diet and her migraines had become much better. Now that gave him an idea, at least a guidepost. So he thought, that makes sense. These terrible spasms and nausea and so on must have something to do with my body chemistry, foods I can't properly digest. So he decided that probably anybody can digest milk. Every baby can digest milk. So he tried to live on milk, and he was just as sick as ever. And then he thought about it again, and it occurred to him that nowhere in nature do adult animals drink milk. Once they're weaned, they're not milk drinkers in any way or manner. So he thought, well, our immediate ancestors, the simians, what did they do? Well, they lived on fruit and nuts and seeds and greens and so on. So he tried that. And the fruit that was most available in Germany, where he was practicing, was apples. So when he ate apples in every form and shape, raw and cooked and baked and juice, he was fine. No migraines. On that basis, then he started to add things, one after another, to see, can I eat this, can I not? If it was something his body couldn't handle, he could get a migraine within 20 minutes. So pretty soon he had what he called his migraine diet, those foods that he could eat and the ones that he couldn't. And after a while, then patients also would come to his office and, complain of migraines, and he would tell them, look, all the books and texts say that migraine is incurable. I have migraines, and I have changed my diet, and when I eat in this manner, I'm free. Why don't you try it? And he would get them coming back and admitting, yes, when they eat the manner that he prescribed, they were free of migraines, and if they were cheating, then they would get new headaches. So he called that his migraine diet, and he would pass it along to patients suffering from migraines. Remember, he was like any other physician. For each disease, there was one specific cure or treatment, okay? But then one day a patient came to him also suffering of migraine, and he came back after 4 or 5 weeks and said, listen, Dr. Gerson, I also had skin tuberculosis, and my migraines disappeared, and so did my skin tuberculosis heal. So my father said, no, that's an incurable disease. That doesn't respond. It must have been something else. So the man showed he had a laboratory tests that no, in fact, he did have skin tuberculosis. My father said, let me see that. Nobody had ever seen these skin tuberculosis lesions heal. By the way, the medical name for that is lupus vulgaris. It's not like lupus erythematosus. It's lupus vulgaris. And yes, indeed, they were healing. So my father couldn't understand. He thought there was a connection with the migraines. He said, look, my shingle says internal and nerve diseases. Do you know anybody else who has this problem? Oh, yes, it's relatively rare. My father said, no, he said, the patients that were on the same floor in the hospital with me. My father said, please, send me some. I'll treat them free of charge. I just want to know if this works. Sure enough, he sent other patients with skin tuberculosis, and they too responded to this migraine diet. And this came to the ears of Professor Sauerbruch, the famous lung specialist in Munich. And he decided to do some trials, 450 patients, incurable. He put on this GERSON migraine diet, and 446 recovered. Now this was something absolutely dramatic. But my father wasn't satisfied with that. He thought, if skin tuberculosis responds to a change in diet and nutrition, why not other forms of TB? Bone tuberculosis, lung tuberculosis, encephalitic TB, and kidney TB. There are many other forms. And he started to heal other patients with TB, including lung tuberculosis, including the wife of Albert Schweitzer, who was brought to him with terminal influenceable lung tuberculosis that had spread to both lungs. And she recovered. She was in her 50s then, and she recovered and lived until about 80. So did many, many others. And then he started to have a demonstration group that he was treating in Berlin under the auspices of the top TB specialists and internists, and using this migraine therapy. And then it turned out that a lot of these terminally ill TB patients often had other problems: allergies, asthma, high blood pressure, kidney disease, low blood pressure, stones, all kinds of other problems. And those too disappeared, along with the tuberculosis. And then it was very obvious, finally, to my father that he was no longer treating a disease. He was now in a whole different ballpark. He was now working with the body, working with the entire biochemistry, working with the whole system so that the body could heal itself, whatever ailed it. With the same thing he had developed originally for his own migraine headaches, he was now healing all forms of TB and blood pressure problems and heart disease and asthma and allergies. When you are restoring all the body's systems, the balances, the underlying problems, the body is capable of healing itself. And that's what it finally occurred to him. He understood that that's what he was doing, rather than what he was trained to do in medical school. You have a problem, here's a drug for it. Or you have a problem here, here's a treatment for that particular symptom. It was quite clear to him then that the symptoms are just the outer upper manifestation of an underlying problem. And in almost all cases, the underlying problem is very similar. And when you are able to get to and change and restore the underlying balances and restore the body's ability to heal itself, That's what he called it, the body's own healing mechanism. Then you heal. And the patients get well. And the very interesting thing, let's look at the other members of the Schweitzer family. First, my father cured the wife of advanced terminal lung tuberculosis. At the same time, I was probably around 10 years old, we were playing with the daughter of Albert Schweitzer, who at that time had an occasional little ulcer that would develop somewhere on her skin. And it would come up and ulcerate a little bit and then heal over. Then a couple of new ones would come. By the time she was 17, she was covered her whole body with ulcers that wouldn't heal. And then if they healed, then 2 new ones would come up. And she was sent all over the world for diagnosing. Because orthodox medicine, unless they have a name and diagnosis, they don't know what to do. And nobody had a diagnosis, nobody had a name for this disease. And finally she was brought to my father. It was found that this disease had been described 5 times in the entire history of medicine, and that it had no name and no etiology. Etiology means they didn't know where it came from. And you know what? My father didn't have a name for it, nor did he have an etiology. But he was by that time totally convinced that the underlying problems are similar, always the same. And by changing the diet and adjusting all the underlying mineral, hormone, enzyme balances, she healed, whatever it was. Nobody knows. What difference does it make? It didn't have a name, so she got well anyway. Some years later, Albert Schweitzer himself came to my father. Now he was suffering from diabetes. And in those days, diabetes was treated how? He was told, okay, if your body can't handle sugars and starches and so on, eat a lot of protein, right? Protein, protein, protein. So was eating protein foods and the chicken and the cheese and the eggs and the meat, and he was getting weaker and weaker, and circulation got worse and worse. And he was unable to work, and that meant he was not really willing to live. He was getting suicidal. When he finally came to my father. Now, he and my father corresponded, they were good friends. His wife and daughter had already been cured. But still, having diabetes, he decided it was a different disease from his wife's TB and his daughter's skin disease. So he first went to the diabetic specialists, like most people do, even though he had this in front of him already. So he came to my father, and my father put him on the same fresh vegetables, fresh juices, including potatoes, salads, fruit, for a diabetic? Yes. And after about 5-6 weeks, he was able to cut his insulin intake in half. After about 10 weeks, he was off insulin, he was well, he was active, he was functioning, circulation was back, and he went back to Africa to work. And as you may remember, some of you, he finally died at the age of 91 or 2, having, in the meantime, he was at my father's hospital in New York at age 75 with his diabetes. He died past 90, and he had collected a Nobel Prize on the way. Now, I can't promise that to everybody else. But at that point then, he had been at my father's clinic, and he saw many, many cancer patients coming in on stretchers and coming and limping and dying and walking away. And that's where, when my father passed away, he was still living, he wrote to my mother, I see in GERSON one of the most eminent geniuses in medical history. Because now he saw people healing of all types of diseases. Okay, now what we see is, for instance, sadly, people like Michael Landon dying of cancer, pancreatic cancer, with liver metastasis spreading to the liver. When the GERSON therapy, we have recovered patients. Some of our patients called them up. They had recovered of the same problem. 5 years, 7 years, 8 years already. And he believed his doctors who told him, no, you're going to die and it's a terminal condition. He didn't want to leave his family. He wouldn't come to the hospital in Mexico. And when he was trying to do a little bit of the GERSON therapy, the doctor scared him. It'll kill you, it'll kill you. So they gave him 2 chemo treatments. In 2 treatments, he was dead. There are no recoveries with chemotherapy of pancreatic cancers with liver metastasis. 0. But we have these cases, and these people talk to him. Then the doctors say, well, they're not documented, but they are. We have the documentation, the biopsy reports. When first they go to the regular doctor, they get cut open, looked at, and the doctor says, sorry, there's nothing we can do, close them back up. They are biopsied, they're documented, then they come to us. But the orthodox doctor still will tell you, no, that's quackery, no, it's not documented, no, they're lying, no, it's not true. We ask them, we have since 10 years an open invitation, come and look. Come look what we're doing. We'll show you the patients. We'll show you their documentation. We'll show you the biopsy report. Here, watch them getting well. Do you know how many American doctors have come to the clinic to look? This is Mexico, right? 0. They say it's quackery. Well, how do they know? It's taught to them. That's what they're told. The medical pharmaceutical establishment at this time, actually this was a year ago last November when these figures came out, and you know they keep coming up, going up and up. The figures for the cancer industry are now $100 billion a year they make. And the worldwide figures for chemotherapy alone is something like $60 billion on chemotherapy. Okay. I have a paper which I'll be glad to give, some of you might be interested, by an oncologist, an establishment man, who made a 10-year study of chemotherapy. He studied all of the available papers. He contacted other top-notch oncologists. He got reports. And he said after 10 years, he got confirmation what he had suspected all along, that chemotherapy doesn't work. But it's a huge industry. And very often people in that kind of business, believe it or not, say, well, more people live off cancer than die of it. That's a good excuse, isn't it? Anyway, on account of that, the doctors are indoctrinated that what we are doing is quackery. What we are doing is a ripoff. We had a young man who came to us, and he's written up in our what we call the 52 Cured and Curable, and we invite you to please pick up this GERSON therapy flyer. It's sitting on the table over there, and inside you have this sheet which has 52 patients recovered from all kinds of supposedly incurable conditions, including 2 or 3 of them who recovered from pancreatic cancer, including a whole number of them recovered from advanced melanoma, where we have some of our best results, including patients recovered from multiple sclerosis, lupus erythematosus, as well as heart disease, asthma, and so on. All right? So you're welcome to pick this up. There's this young man who came to us, and he is on here, who was suffering from astrocytoma, a brain tumor. He was only 31. He had been working in his father's gas station. And of course the fumes are very, very bad. The gasoline fumes are very toxic, liver toxic. And he became ill, and he started to first have very severe stomach problems, and took Tums like there was no tomorrow. Then he started to have seizures. And of course was at the hospital, doctors did an x-ray, and they found a lump, they found a problem in the brain, MRIs showed in fact a tumor in the brain, so they opened up his brain and took out what they could. But they couldn't get it all because he would have been a vegetable. So they left a tumor in the brain the size of a lemon and sent him home, a little bit of radiation to reduce the seizures, and said, get your affairs in order. Young man with a young family, young children, and a wife. So the wife was the sister of a doctor, an MD. And the wife said, well, the doctors give you 3 months, let's go to Florida 3 months and have fun, and well, that'll be the end. Not realizing that you don't have fun with a patient who's dying of cancer, even of brain tumors. So he said, no, I want to see whether I can't find some way to help myself. And he decided to come to the clinic in Mexico. Over the screaming and yelling of his brother-in-law, the wife's brother. He says, they're going to kill you. How are we going to kill him? He's dying. They are rip-offs. They are quacks. It's unscientific. They only want your money. Okay? Now we have MRIs from his whole 2 years recovery period. And you can see the tumor first getting more diffuse, getting smaller, smaller, and it's gone. He is completely well. After 2 years, his brain was completely clean. It's now 6 years, and he's perfectly well. The wife never once lifted a finger to make a fresh glass of juice for him, not once. The mother took care of it. Now what does the brother-in-law say? Does he want to come and see what we're doing? No. He says, but you're going to die. Well, wait a minute. For 6 years, he's well already, right? Of course, we all die. He's going to die too. Question is when. All right? Anyway, it's very difficult for a doctor to see and understand and believe that whatever he has been taught is wrong. That with the nutrition and enzymes and with all of the things we're doing, which I'll get into in a minute, that you can, in fact, heal. They say, no, once cancer is developed, food has nothing to do with it. You have to address it aggressively. You have to cut and burn and poison it, okay? But where do they get? Every year, more people die of cancer. Every year, the number goes up. With all the best chemo and with all the best radiation and surgery, the number keeps going up. And once it spreads in the body and metastasizes, there's nothing they can do. All right, so what do we do? What did Gerson find out? He found out that, first of all chronic disease is based on two major factors. The two factors are deficiency and toxicity. Not what you think. You might be thinking of the causes of cancer or the causes of any disease. They are underlying causes. Deficiency and toxicity. So where does the deficiency come from? Essentially from the food you're eating. The food you're eating is manufactured, is depleted, is bleached, is processed, is cooked and fried and emulsified and jarred and pickled and preserved and has all kinds of things done to it, so the live substances are gone. You're not getting enzymes. You're not really getting most of the vitamins. Well, bread, for instance. Take white bread. Okay, they take the hull off, which has most of the B vitamins. Now you have the white kernel. They take the seed, what's it called, the kernel, off of the wheat so that it doesn't spoil, because it has essential fatty acids in it. So the flour or the bread would spoil and get rancid. So they take that away, which has the vitamin E in it. Then they bleach it, make it nice and white, right? But then, in order for the bugs not to get in it, they put preservatives in it, okay? And the maggots won't go in it. They can't survive on this kind of depleted food. But they tell you it is now enriched. Now they put 5 minimal amounts of vitamins or minerals in there to replace the 22 or 3 that they have removed. Now they call it enriched. So you get essentially white flour with this bleached and toxic and depleted, and which has a minimal thing of artificial pharmaceutical materials added instead of getting natural foods. That's the bread our kids are supposed to develop bodies on. And of the white rolls they get with their hamburgers and frankfurters, with zero nutrition. Where are the vitamins, minerals, enzymes? Zero. And what are they getting in their hamburgers? Essentially fat and damaged flesh, meat. Now, let's look at meat. Everybody is turned and trained, and that meat, you need meat for strength, right? You need meat for energy. You need meat to replace the protein in your body. Well, that's all wrong, because the meat doesn't do it. When you kill animals first of all, the animals that are fattened in the feedlots have somewhere between 20 and 30% fat. The animals our ancestors ate many hundred years ago, that they would hunt and shoot and kill in the woods and in the fields, they lived out in the open and free-ranging. They had up to 3% fat. Our pigs nowadays have 40 to 60% fat. The boars in the wilderness have 3% fat. I ran across an item just the other day which says that in Europe, when pigs are carried in their railroads to market, 10% die of heart attacks before they ever get there. That's how fat they are. And that fat is supposed to nourish you? Now something else has come up. Of course, the fat does damage to you. It deposits in your arteries, it causes your atherosclerosis, it causes heart attacks and strokes, it causes phlebitis, it causes high blood pressure, kidney damage, etc., etc. Now, the meat you eat, when the animals are slaughtered, they smell death, they have fear. And with the fear, their adrenals start to secrete. And with the adrenaline in the blood, they are now killed, slaughtered. Then they're aged. Now the adrenaline is toxic. When a cat catches a mouse or a bird, it doesn't kill it right away and eat it right away. It's not cruel when it plays with its prey. It's not play. It makes it move around when it's almost dead, but not quite. It makes it activate a little bit, because during the hunting, the animal secretes adrenaline, and that's toxic to the predator, and he won't eat it until the animal, while its liver is still functioning, neutralizes some of these substances, gets them out of the bloodstream, and when the blood serum is clear, now he'll kill and eat this animal. What do? We do the opposite. We eat the flesh with the adrenaline in it, toxic. Then we let it age and putrefy. What is aging? It's putrefying. Flesh putrefies, it goes into rigor mortis. The protein in the muscle changes, is no longer normal. And then we cook it. And in cooking, we kill 2 of the essential amino acids. L-lysine, L-tryptophan are killed in cooking. All right? Then, now last April, research was just completed at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. A PhD researcher found that when meat is heated 212 degrees or over, in other words, cooked, broiled, boiled, fried, any old way, the protein in it deteriorates and breaks down into so-called polycyclic amides, which are toxic and cause colon cancer. Now, in 1978 already, a US government study before a special panel, Senate Select Committee on Nutrition and Human Needs, they found that meat eaters in our population have 10 times the colon cancer of non-meat eaters who, for religious reason or any reason at all, Seventh-day Adventists or otherwise vegetarians, have 10% of the colon cancer of meat eaters. Okay? So don't ever believe that you need to eat meat, fish, cheese, chicken, eggs, and any of those animal substances. They are not good nutrition. I'm vegetarian. I'm going to be 70 next month. I will show you that I can sit here and do a lecture for 6 hours and still help with selling and so on and function. And I tell you frankly, if I eat meat, I can't. That's what wears me down and spoils my energy. Okay? So that's the first thing. You want to eliminate almost all of the animal proteins. The fresh, live, active substances in fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, fresh salads is what nourishes your body. That's the nutrients your body needs. And that's the nutrients with which we heal. But that's nowhere nearly enough. With the GERSON therapy, when we are getting terminally ill patients, severely depleted, where the body has actually collapsed and doesn't fight anymore, and the disease takes over and kills, then you have to do a lot more than just eat different. Now with the Gerson therapy, we give the patients a fresh glass of juice made from organic fruits and vegetables, free of sprays and poisons. We give a fresh glass of juice every hour, 8 ounces of carrot juice with apple. Carrot, you know, beta-carotene activates the immune system. And they are very high in minerals, all the minerals you want to name. Magnesium and manganese and zinc and copper and, of course, calcium and potassium and the trace minerals. They're all there in carrots, plus the beta-carotene. Plus, carrot juice has 1.4% protein. The right kind of protein, the vegetarian protein that your body can assimilate. It's an extremely valuable food. We also give the patients 4 glasses of freshly made juices from fresh greens, salad greens and various other greens, rich in cholesterol, rich in chlorophyll, yes, and of course rich in iron and rich in the enzymes and active materials. Then we give the patients a total of 13 glasses of these juices, 1 glass of orange juice for breakfast. Orange juice isn't all that valuable. The vegetable juices are much more important and are much higher in protein. And that's not all. 13 glasses of juice, 1 fresh glass every hour. Then we also give the patients a full vegetarian meal. They're not being starved. A full vegetarian meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, with fresh salad, fresh soup, everything freshly made, free of salt, free of fat, and fresh vegetables, baked potatoes or other forms of potatoes, and fruit. And guess what? Usually within the first week or so, they have appetite again. Also those who couldn't eat at all, also those who were nauseated, also those who've had chemo, they can eat again. And we can get all the nutrients in the fresh live form. So why don't we just give them pills? Why don't we just give them a bunch of mineral and vitamin pills and enzyme pills? Very simple. The more damaged the body, the more toxic, the more depleted, the less it can work with pharmaceutical chemicals. And that's what the pills are. It won't assimilate. We had a patient who came to us and she had been diagnosed with colon cancer. But for a number of months, she had taken a whole handful of vitamins because of a nutritionist who gave her all kinds of vitamins, handfuls of vitamins every day. But then somebody told her, well, you shouldn't really take that many vitamins, so she stopped taking them. About 8 months before she had a GI series and was diagnosed and they found the cancer, okay? 8 months she hadn't taken any of those pills, yet in the ascending colon they found dozens of them in the X-ray. They were not assimilated, they were not diluted, not digested, they were just sitting there. I mean, you can stuff them in your mouth. What shows you, what tells you, what guarantees that they're going to be dissolved and assimilated, that they go into your cell systems? But the fresh juices do. The fresh juices have another extremely important activity. When you drink 13 8-ounce glasses, let's see, 12 is 3 quarts, right? Plus the 13th, plus we also have the soup. It's almost a gallon of liquid a day. What do you think that does to your kidneys? Flushes out, starts to cleanse your kidneys. All right? So, the other problem that we have to deal with, toxicity and deficiency. Deficiency we are starting to build up with all those foods and juices. The other problem, toxicity. How do we deal with that? Now that was one of the greatest genius contributions of my father's. First of all, to recognize the problem of toxicity, which orthodox medicine still doesn't recognize. If they did, they wouldn't give you pills. They wouldn't give you the high blood pressure medication and the blood thinner medication and the other drugs that you get for all kinds of problems and the sleeping pills and the whatever they give you. Because all drugs, please look it up in the physician's desk reference guide, don't take my word for it. All drugs, bar none, are liver toxic, have damaging side effects. So the damage, the toxins in the body, the toxins from your food, your bleached and emulsified and dyed and preserved foods that you've been eating for years and years. The excess fats and proteins in the fatty meats and fish and chicken and cheese and eggs that your body can no longer properly deal with and break down. These produce toxins in your body. And then once you develop disease, whether it's cancer or lupus or anything else, the diseased tissue produces toxins in your body. Now, how do we get rid of those? I've already told you, the beginning is by flushing it out with a lot of live active substances with juices. Now, why don't we just drink water and take pills? Because water isn't always clean, and even if you drink distilled water, it doesn't give you anything. No nutrients go into your body. The body desperately needs nutrients when it's ill, chronically damaged. And the other way we do is Dr. GERSON developed, and I'm sure you've heard, of coffee enemas. Now, the colon, there are books written about the importance of cleansing the colon, and there's a book written by the title of Death Starts in the Colon and talks about enemas and cleanses. That's all very good. But the coffee is different. The coffee makes all the difference because the caffeine is absorbed through the hemorrhoidal vein into the portal system, and at the liver, it goes directly to the liver. And at the point of the liver, it helps to open the bile ducts. And for the first time now, the liver can get rid of these accumulated toxins, which otherwise accumulate in the liver, and block it. Toxins are also defined as enzyme inhibitors. So as long as there are toxins in the body, enzyme inhibitors, the enzyme systems can't work. You can't digest properly. You can't assimilate properly. You can't break down the fats and proteins to the end products. They accumulate in your body. They cause damage. Well, all of this has to be released, overcome. Plus, all the years and years that you have taken in food chemicals. Now, the FDA has approved something like 10,000 food chemicals of emulsifiers and dyes and food preservatives and all kinds of things that you put in cans and jars and pickled and preserves and bottled foods and in boxed foods and so on. All the preservatives and so on. They're all toxic. The FDA says they are safe. They're not safe. You're getting them into your system daily. They are not safe. You can't do that. But over the years, when you accumulate this stuff, your body is bound to deteriorate, is bound to eventually break down. Now, it's very important. There were two researchers in Japan by the name of Yamagiwa and Ichikawa who were painting rabbit's ears. Now, this goes back to the 30s. They were painting rabbit's ears with tars. Now, you know, tars are carcinogenic and eventually cause cancer. But they were surprised that it took so long for the cancer to develop. So after 3 months of painting all these rabbits, they took one group and sacrificed them and examined them. And they found that, yes, there was some damage to the essential organs. The essential organs being the liver, the kidney, the pancreas, the spleen, the heart, the brain, the lungs, essential organs. But no tumors had developed yet. So they continued, the other animals, they continued painting their ears. After 6 months, they killed another group. No tumors had developed yet, not one. And they examined the next group. Now there was extensive damage to the essential organs. It took 7, 8 to 9 months before the first tumors appeared. In other words, until there's extensive, severe damage to all the essential organ systems, you're not even going to develop chronic disease, especially as serious as cancer. Now, what does orthodox medicine do with the tumor? It cuts it off. What have they done to restore the damage to the underlying organ systems? Nothing. Because first of all, they don't understand the deficiency problem. Secondly, they don't know what to do with the toxicity problem. So is it surprising that in almost all patients the cancer comes back? So they do radiation, they kill some of the tumor cells, but that just adds to the damage. It can kill some of the cells, but new ones are going to develop because the body's defenses are not functioning. And they give chemotherapy. Now they poison the defenses. They poison the immune system. They poison the bone marrow. They poison the kidneys and the liver. That's supposed to cure anything? It poisons the tumor tissue sometimes a little faster than the healthy tissue. So often the tumors go down for a while, temporarily, until the rest of the tissue gives out too. And then it comes back. And then they do more chemo, but the new cells that develop are resistant to chemo. That doesn't work anymore. Therefore, it's really useless. It doesn't go. You can't do that. You cannot heal with poisoning. We do the opposite. We detoxify. We help the body get rid of poisons. We restore the enzyme systems. Now, Otto Warburg, a twice Nobel Prize winner, showed that one of the major things that you have to have is proper oxygen development and use in the body, that the food that you eat needs to be oxidized in the cell systems into energy. Every cell needs energy. Now, in order to do all of this, you need enzyme activity. Toxins are enzyme inhibitors, so if there's too much inhibition of enzymes, the cell system is no longer oxidized. Now they have to, in order to stay alive, they have to use this energy and turn it into fermentative energy to stay alive. But the fermentative energy does only one thing within the cell, and that was developed later, that was shown later. With fermentative energy, the cell can only grow and split and grow and split and grow and split uncontrolled. And what's that? Cancer. So when you get enough toxins, enough damage to the enzyme systems, and not getting any fresh enzymes into your bodies because of the depleted, dead, cooked foods that you eat, and the enzyme systems are blocked because of the toxins, and you get into fermentative energy production, that's the beginning of cancer. But that is not necessarily cancer, because a normal, healthy body with the immune system working recognizes these malignant cells as foreign cells, and they'll attack and destroy them. So why doesn't it destroy the cells? Because the immune system is also toxic and not working. What is the immune system? It's made up of cells, of organ systems. They too need live, active nutrients. They too are blocked with excess protein and excess fats and excess chemicals and excess sodium, salt in the system. Dr. GERSON showed that the beginning of all chronic disease was loss of potassium from the cell systems and invasion of sodium, salt. In nature, all the foods that we get, the leaves and the fruits and the vegetables and the roots and the seeds, whatever we eat, very high in potassium, low in sodium. And that's how over the millennia our bodies developed to live on this type of food. That's what we need. But when foods are processed and cooked and jarred and preserved, always the potassium is lost and always sodium is added. So we completely change, we reverse the mineral balances that we need. Sodium, the salt, has to stay in, we do need a little bit, has to stay in the fluid systems, in the blood and serum. But the potassium has to stay within the cell systems because they activate the enzymes. The potassium activates enzymes. Sodium is an enzyme inhibitor. And if it penetrates the cells, your cells can't work anymore. But why does it penetrate the cells? Because the foods you eat are so damaged, are so changed, your potassium has been lost, sodium has been added, that you're constantly flooding the body with excess sodium and not enough potassium. And eventually the body can no longer get rid of it. The body has many systems to try desperately to get rid of excess sodium. You get rid of it in perspiration, you get rid of it in urine, you get rid of it in feces, you get rid of it also even in your tears and your mucus. But the body is constantly flooded with it and not getting enough potassium. And eventually, it can no longer function that way and collapses. And this collapse, whether it's now the immune system, the enzyme system, the pancreas, whether it's the digestive system, whether it's the skin or the fat digestive system, or the pancreas for the diabetes, makes no difference. Actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. Diabetes is not a problem of the pancreas. It's not even a sugar problem. The age-onset diabetes is a fat digestion problem. In very large numbers of diabetics, they find there's adequate insulin in the bloodstream. So why do they have diabetes? It's because the insulin can't reach the insulin receptors within the cell systems. The receptors within the cell are blocked with cholesterol, fat. It's the meat eating that's largely responsible. And the milk and the protein and all animal proteins are high in fat. The meat and the fish and the cheese and the chicken and the eggs, high in fat. They block the insulin receptors and the insulin can't get there. So what do we have to do? Cut out the animal products, the fats, and give vegetables, and give juices. So high in sugars, no problem. Once you get rid of the excess cholesterol, the insulin works, and you're fine. And that is something Orthodox medicine doesn't admit or see either. Once you have diabetes, right, you have to take insulin for the rest of your life. Very few doctors have ever understood that you can control diabetes with diet, proper food. But it doesn't really matter what you call the disease. When you are able to flood the body with nutrients, as we do, with the 13 juices plus the 3 vegetarian meals, these patients are able to ingest the equivalent of 20 pounds of fresh food a day. 20 pounds. Now, there's no way you can eat that. But you can drink a glass of juice every hour, rich in all the nutrients. And they rebuild the organs, whether it's bones, whether it's the stomach, whether it's the liver, whether it's the kidney, doesn't matter. When those nutrients go back into the organ systems, the body heals. Let me give you an interesting example. We had a man who was only about 51. He had prostate cancer, unusual in a man that young. Usually comes 60, 65, 70. He was only 51, had prostate cancer, was discovered because he also had constant kidney colics. Very painful kidney colics. They couldn't find stones, whether there were stones or not, I don't know, it's immaterial. So he had the kidney colics and he had the prostate cancer. He was also on full disability as a fire chief because he had 3 herniated discs. And the disc, his spine was pressing on the sciatic nerve, and he was in constant pain, plus his left thigh, normal thigh, had gone down by 50%, atrophied, because of the pressure on the sciatic nerve. So he came to the GERSON, he also had high blood pressure, came to the GERSON therapy because of the cancer. Within the first day, from the first day on, he never once had another kidney colic. Never once. Kidney colics are protein related, and we don't give animal proteins, no more problems. His high blood pressure was gone in 6 days, as we have in most patients. Normal blood pressure. Drugs, no more drugs. Okay? Then he had the problem of the herniated disc and the cancer. And 2 years from the start of the therapy, he went back to the original doctor who was the head of oncology at the University of California in Santa Barbara, top-notch man, had himself re-examined, prostate's clean. And now he also had an x-ray of his spine. Now he was on total disability because of herniated discs, okay? X-ray of the spine shows perfectly normal spine, discs rebuilt, okay? And his thigh, almost completely, not quite 100%, 92.3% rebuilt. Unheard of, doesn't exist. So I asked him, he was here and I was showing him as a recovered patient. So I asked him, hey, you were on full disability for your herniated discs and the pain in your spine and the atrophy and you couldn't work. Did they take the disability payments away? He was fine. He says no. They didn't believe it. And well, what's to believe when you see an X-ray? When you see the normal thigh? When you see the man is up and about and functioning without pain? No, it doesn't exist, therefore we don't believe it. Okay? So what are we going to do with people like that? Are these doctors? Are they scientists? We get other things too. I had a lady who came back to the hospital and she wanted to pick up some of the enzymes and minerals that she was taking. And she says, "Hello, Charlotte." And I must admit that we've had several thousand patients and I do not remember everybody. So she said, "You don't remember me. I was at the hospital 3.5 years ago. I had breast cancer and liver metastases." That in itself is an interesting statement. Once there's cancer in the liver, with orthodox treatment, you have 3 to 6 months to live, period. That's it, and there is no recovery from cancer in the liver, okay? So 3.5 years, she tells me, she had cancer in the liver. I said, "Well, I'm very happy, and I'm glad you're doing well. What did your doctor say?" Now, when a doctor sees something unusual like that, if he were a true scientist, wouldn't he be interested to say, "What did you do?" No, no. What did her doctor say? "Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. It's doing you good. But don't bother me with it," right? He didn't want to know. Unfortunately, of course, it's not entirely his fault. There are laws. The law in California says any physician who treats cancer with anything but radiation, surgery, or chemotherapy is a felon, goes to jail, loses his license, and pays a $10,000 fine, so he can't do anything with it. Even if he knows. There are laws against healing cancer. The law now says if, for instance, a patient has cancer, has been treated with surgery, radiation, and chemo, and is failing and dying, the doctor is not allowed to try anything else. He must use only those treatments that have already proven to be failures. Which means the state now requires you to die, and that's unconstitutional. I do not believe that if that law were ever tested that it would stand up. But the powers, the chemotherapy and medical pharmaceutical powers with their billions behind them, keep this kind of thing going, and you and I don't have the kind of money to fight it. They can keep us in court for years. We don't have that kind of money. We can't pay for the lawyers. Okay? So the law stands, and you have to die because that's what the chemotherapy chemical pharmaceutical trust is saying. It's very bad. Besides, not just in California, there are other states that have similar or the same laws. Why do you think we have to function in Mexico? That's the reason. If you want to heal, you can't do it in the US. Now, healing is very special. Healing, in my book, is not cutting out a bunch, cutting out a tumor, is not radiating a damaged area. Healing is not dealing with a symptom, which would just come back. Healing is not giving a drug that causes damage and causes new disease. If you take a drug for high blood pressure for long enough, you're going to get new problems. Then you get kidney problems, and you have a drug for the kidney, Lasix or something like that. And that causes your potassium to be lost. Then you have to take other drugs. Pretty soon you're on a list of drugs this long, and you haven't gotten rid of the disease. You just got new diseases because of the drug damage. That, in my book, is not healing. Healing is totally restoring all the underlying systems. Is restoring the kidneys and the liver and the essential organs, the spleen and the lungs and the heart and the brain. Everything needs to be fully restored and function well. Then the body will heal. And as Dr. Gerson said, the body's own healing mechanism works again. And whether you are healing bones or you're healing infections, or whether you're healing old chronic hepatitis or Epstein-Barr or this so-called chronic fatigue syndrome, or whether you're healing lupus or anything else, or cancer or diabetes, makes no difference. And that's where, of course, we clash with orthodox medicine. They say, "What do you mean? One treatment for every disease? That's quackery." That's very difficult. It takes the basic understanding, and that they haven't got. Doctors in medical school do not have courses in biochemistry, and that's where we're dealing, the underlying biochemistry of the whole body. And we have to address all the systems. And we don't just push a little here and shove a little there. We work with the immune system, the enzyme system, the hormone system. We work with the minerals. We work with the digestion. We work with the detoxifying. Every part of the body has to be restored and reactivated so that you can truly heal. But that's what we do. And that's where we have these healed patients. And it doesn't matter of what disease. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get too many people to come here today. We have only 2 recovered patients we'll be showing you. But these 52, that's not the only ones we have. We have hundreds and hundreds of terminally ill, so-called incurable patients that are not living a few extra months, that are recovered for years. And the way they got into these lists is because they're exceptionally well documented, unquestionable, because they're well and recovered for at least 3 years or more. We don't want to take the patients who are only better for 3 or 6 months. Then the orthodox, well, we can do that too. Of course, fine. But we have the total recoveries, 3, 4, 6, 8 years. And we have from Dr. GERSON's book, okay, he says a cancer therapy results of 50 cases. Now he said, and we still say today, the bottom line is the only thing that counts. Does the patient get well and stay well in good, normal, functioning, active life? Okay? Now, of these 50 patients that he showed, there were a number that were young enough. Now, the book was written in 58. Father died in 59. There were a number that were young enough in 58 to be alive today, and they are. These were terminally ill patients. And we have been able to find at least a dozen of those that were young enough, alive and well today, in active life, busy and working and fine. One of the patients who had terminal melanoma at the time, her husband said she had at most 3 months to live. And that was in 1942 or 3. 46, I don't remember the exact number. She came to the clinic just a month ago. She as well. She came to the hospital because her daughter-in-law has cancer. She is 74 and well, active and looking well and busy and with her family and her grandchildren, okay? In good condition. After 45 years, that's healing. That's not cutting out a piece or a symptom or a lump. That's healing, because she was given 3 months to live at that time. And many of these patients are still alive, and we are still finding some of Dr. GERSON's patients who were not in the book, because in order to get in the book, they've had to be well at least 4 or 5 years. And there were others that were well a little shorter time. My father was, at the time he died, he was preparing another book with 100 more cases. Well, of those, we still find a whole bunch that are alive and well. True healing, getting to the underlying problem. Healing not only the cancer, but all the other problems that do occur in many patients. And many other diseases. That's true healing. And that's where the GERSON therapy cannot be equaled. And I do unfortunately have to say, for instance, in many cases, Laetrile can be helpful. You may have heard of Laetrile. Laetrile helps the body fight tumor tissue, but it doesn't restore the liver and the kidneys and the immune system. And when you stop the Laetrile, the cancer keeps right on going and you die. That's not healing. We can use Laetrile, we do sometimes. It can be a help. It can help to destroy malignant tissue, but it doesn't restore and heal the body. It doesn't overcome the high blood pressure and the kidney disease and all the other problems that these patients suffer from, because it specifically attacks tumor tissue. Well, good. And as long as it's non-toxic, yes, we'll use it. But it doesn't heal, meaning restore, rebuild, reactivate. And that's the key. And For that, you have to reach the underlying problems. And the underlying problems are deficiency and toxicity. You have to rebuild, replenish, juices, and the fresh foods. Everything organic. Why? Because you don't want to get the chemicals and the residual insecticides and pesticides into the system. But that isn't all. I'll cover more of that in my workshop later. When foods are grown on deficient soil, artificially fertilized with 3 minerals, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Well, that's good. But the soil needs something like 51 or 2 minerals. Where's the magnesium and the manganese, and where's the zinc and the copper, and where's the calcium and all the other things the plants need, plus the trace minerals that should be there? It's not in the NPK. So with the artificial fertilizer, the plants get 3 out of 51 minerals. So the plants are deficient. And when plants are deficient, like any other creature in nature that's deficient, nature destroys it. It sends in the bugs, it sends in the disease to destroy this deficient creature. Now the farmers come crying to the chemical companies that sell them the fertilizer and say, hey, we are having pests, and we are having insects, and we are having fungus, and we are having disease, and we are losing our plants. What shall we do? We have something we can sell you. Now come the sprays, and the pesticide, and insecticide, and antifungal, and all of the other stuff. And it goes into the plant. It's often sprayed while the plant is still in bloom. It's often planted like potatoes are planted with a chemical right next to it. It goes into the plant. You can't wash it off. You can't peel it off. It's in the plant. Plus, these minerals are lacking. So you're getting deficient, toxic food. And you can't heal a deficient, toxic body with deficient, toxic food. That's why we insist on organically grown fruits and vegetables, free of poisons. Then some people tell me, well, then if I can't eat the fresh raw foods because they have chemical residues, I'll eat the canned and frozen food. But they have the same problem. Not only that, they have additional chemicals added. That's not the answer. That won't do. Okay? Now I think our hour is almost up, so we will have a moment to change tapes. Then I will start to talk about cured incurables, and also in the second hour I will be glad to take any questions. Okay? Dr. Gerson felt, and that's why he put this way in his book, that the most important thing is not the theory, the most important thing is not the food and the juices, the most important thing of any therapy is, does it work? Do the patients get well? That's what matters, that's what counts. Okay, so he put, as part of the book, results of 50 cases. We need to see the results. We need to know that it works. And that's one of the things we like to do. We want to show you not only printed matter, but whenever possible, live recovered patients. We are very fortunate to have here today Marilyn Barnes, who is not only a very much live recovered patient, but she is absolutely an artist with food. She does wonderful things with Gerson therapy foods, and she is now preparing a delicious Gerson luncheon that we hope most of you will attend and enjoy. So right now, Marilyn will tell you about her problems and how she became ill and how she recovered. Please.
Hello. I usually start my testimonial with the comment that I'm glad to be here today. Now, if people have heard me speak before, that has a double meaning. When I was 36, I was diagnosed with 2 forms of malignant cancer. So when I say I'm glad to be here, I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. You know, I could be in another form, maybe just a memory today, if I hadn't found this wonderful book and some of the things I did. In 1979, as I said, when I was 36 years old, and that's quite young to get 2 forms of cancer, I was diagnosed with malignant melanoma stage 4. It was done as part of a biopsy, so there was actual proof, and also cervical dysplasia, cervical carcinoma in situ, which is a woman's form of cancer, and that was also pretty serious. All of the doctors, and I did see doctors, felt that I should have surgery and other treatment. In fact, one doctor said before he met me, bring your suitcase. This was on the telephone. Bring your suitcase. I know what I want to do. Well, I didn't want to bring my suitcase. I wanted his opinion, but I thought that it was quite unfair for him to give me a diagnosis and directions without even meeting me, without even examining me. This is sometimes what happens. But he knew what he wanted to do. Because in melanoma, they usually do they take out your lymph system and they do a lot of cutting. I was very, very fortunate to have support and to have the insight not to have all of that done. I finally had some minor surgery, which was completed, and the doctor said, you know, you should just go home and forget about this and don't worry about it. And he was very honest with me. He said, melanoma is really not curable, and if at best it won't come back, and if at worst it does, then you know we'll just meet that when we come to it. Of course, I was the kind that was very inquisitive, so I went to a medical library, and I disguised myself as a researcher, you know, a student doing a paper, and I asked the nurse to see books on melanoma, and she took me aside. She said, honey, this is the worst kind of cancer. She says, you should see what it does to people. Well, I looked at the pictures, and I saw, and I knew that I didn't want to die that way. I mean, people's bodies turned black, and they lost their minds and their function. And that was the worst of my 2 cancers. The other was the one that you always get a hysterectomy for because, you know, if you cut a part out, it won't come back. Well, I knew that cancer was systemic. You know, I had 2 forms in 1 year. And it ran in my family, and I hadn't had the best nutrition growing up. So I knew I had to help it besides cutting. I guess I was lucky I didn't get too much cut out. After I finished with the medical people, I went on my search. And being a bit of a health fanatic, having changed my family's nutrition in previous years, I decided to look in health stores and in health libraries. And I was fortunate, you know, to be at the right place at the right time. I was in a health store in Virginia Beach, and a man had this book in his hand, and he was talking about doing his coffee enema. Well, I had been told about this very briefly. I thought, oh, I need to know more. So I just went up to a perfect stranger. I said, tell me more about that. I have cancer. And he said, oh, there's a lady that lives not far from here. Go and visit her for a day. You will be totally inspired, and you'll want to do this. So I visited a woman who had a grapefruit-sized tumor that had shrunk to a small hard spot. And she's alive and well today. She was in her late 50s when I met her. This was 12 years ago. And she did the GERSON therapy for lymphoma. And I was just amazed. You know, if you don't go and see someone like that, it's like you all meeting me here today, you just can't believe it. But it's true. She had this book, which is another inspiration to me. It's called Cancer Winner. It's about a woman that had malignant melanoma who did the therapy on her own before the clinic opened. Well, with these 2 books in hand and a desire for a juicer that cost a little more than I was wanting to spend, I decided to do this therapy. And you know, thank God I did. I don't know what to tell you, except I probably wouldn't be here today. And all along the time that I've done the program, I've met more and more people who have done well. And people will say to me, what's the statistics? What are the chances? I ran a boarding house for cancer patients who were doing the GERSON therapy as a group. And you know, I saw more people get well that didn't. It's hard to talk about statistics because it's such an individual thing. If you do the therapy diligently and correctly, as Dr. GERSON said in his book, their chances of winning are very, very strong. And of course, not only did I see people get well from cancer, but they would come, as Charlotte has mentioned, or will mention, with arthritis and high blood pressure and high cholesterol, and all the things that are being talked about and printed about in the news today. You know, it's really interesting. Dr. GERSON came up with these ideas in 1920. You know, what took so long? Why aren't they paying attention? You know, they do it when it's profitable for them to talk about it. I mean, this isn't a profitable therapy for the doctoring world. You know, your lunch didn't cost more than a certain amount to prepare, and it wasn't full of drugs. Anyway, I have to hold back from talking about political issues, because the more I discovered in running a boarding house for cancer patients, the more upset I got, and it wasn't really worth it. Anyhow, what we could do is take charge of our own health. If you're not here because you're sick, and I hope you're not, this is such a marvelous way for prevention. You know, a man in the break said, well, what do I do for high cholesterol? You know, you just have to work a little harder in your kitchen and be willing to spend the extra money. You know, if organic food is 50 cents more a pound, you'll pay now or you'll pay later, literally. And if you don't go and make an effort, go to Mother's in Costa Mesa or California Health in Fullerton, or right here, there's a nutrition mart, and tell them you want more organic produce. Buy food that costs more. And then take it to your kitchen and spend a little more time. Get rid of the microwave and carry out food, because you won't get well eating junk. You know, I take time to fix food. This is my temple, and I don't put junk in it. If I do, I get junk. I'm almost 50 years old, and I have the energy of a 20-year-old. People have a hard time believing I'm almost 50. I mean, you know, and in fact, you know, this man did it for me. And they say, well, what's the secret of youth? I say, eat well, prevent disease, and take the time that it requires to do the things that aren't convenient in your kitchen. That's what it boils down to. All of you with your fancy microwaves and all the restaurants on every corner, it's hard to be focused, but it's worth it. And when I go to a restaurant, you know, I eat a baked potato and a salad, and I avoid the fats, and I keep my weight right, and I keep my energy up, and I keep my health. I mean, I feel great. You know, I can't believe I was going to die. You know, they just shook their head when they saw the diagnosis. The dermatologist that found that I was stage 4, he was kind of proud because I was his first cancer. He was a young doctor. And when he saw me come back to visit 5 or 6 years later, his mouth dropped open. I mean, nobody gets well when they have stage 4 cancer. It always reoccurs. And people always die from it. He just couldn't believe it. You know, when the doctors see GERSON patients come back, sometimes they say, you know, I don't think you had cancer. Or maybe there was something wrong with that biopsy. They can't believe that something works. Well, I believe it. When you have your lunch, you'll believe it. And if lunch is a little late, it's because we had a lot more people than we thought, so we're working hard. Very good. Thank you.
I'd like to add a little bit here to the situation with melanoma. It so happens that with the GERSON therapy, we have absolutely exceptionally good results with melanoma, the kind of cancer that doctors simply give up on. We have, for instance, a lady, a great friend, who, very famous, you would immediately recognize her name, I can't mention it, who had already experienced in her family, her own child, that the GERSON therapy works. And she is buddy-buddy with a top-notch man who is in control of Sloan Kettering in New York. And she told him one day she wanted to investigate alternative therapies. She said, if I'm going to investigate any kind of cancer specifically, what kind would you suggest I look into? And without hesitation, the answer was melanoma. She said, fine. She knew we did very well. We have exceptionally many recovered cases of melanoma. So she said, fine, well, I tell you what, I'm here now in New York. Why don't you let me study your cases and make an analysis of your cases, and then I'll study theirs and compare. So they hummed and hawed a little. Now this is Sloan Kettering, New York, one of the world's top centers. Where did the Shah of Iran go, right? He had a little money. Sloan Kettering. So they hummed and hawed about looking at the melanoma cases. Finally they came out and said, look, we don't have any cases because all the melanoma patients die, so we throw their records out. All right? So we don't have any cases. In other words, no recoveries. And we have dozens, hundreds. By the way, not only Jackie Davison's book, which is no longer available in book form, she gave us permission to put it this way. Not only, she had hundreds of tumors, too many to count. She was doing it alone at home because there was no hospital at that time. And she's alive and well today. It's over 15 years. She gives her story. There's another lady who had melanoma who writes up her story. Very delightful book. This lady is a good writer. She was writing for BBC in London, and with humor and pathos and charm, and delightful book, how she recovered of melanoma, arthritis, diabetes, the works. Okay. Now, we also want to make sure that you understand that this is not a treatment for melanoma, period. Okay? It is not limited to any kind of cancer. We have right now a lady staying at my house who was at our hospital 20 months ago. when her cancer was first discovered, it was cervical cancer, had spread to the uterus, had spread to the pelvis, had spread into the abdominal wall, and she had tumors also in her breast and lymph nodes in her shoulder. It was inoperable. They gave her no chance. Well, we can use a little chemo, but, you know. And before she ever thought about chemo, she had managed to hear about the Gerson therapy. She has been at our hospital for about 2-3 weeks. She is now 20 months. She is totally recovered. She is clear of cancer. She is running and jogging, preparing for Olympic running, full of energy on vegetarian food, okay? No meat. She is well. And that's what counts. Now we have a lady here in the audience. Would you like to come up for a few moments, please? Okay. And you have a difficult name, Zawodowski? Zawodowski. Okay, Roz, right. That's easier. Okay, Roz.
Say Roz Z when I
Okay, Roz. You were a patient at the hospital.
in 1986.
1986. What was your problem at the time?
Well, from 83 to 86, my legs were oozing. I was losing all my electrolytes. My body was red. It was almost like a lupus. My immune test came out just, the doctor in Covina, Dr. Privatera, gave me different immune tests, and they were very extensive ones, and they were just like a cancer's immune. I mean, I had no immune system.
No, very weak immune system.
Yes, just like a cancer patient. And when friends saw me, they hadn't seen me for a while, they burst into tears because one friend had been through Auschwitz, and he saw me. He said I looked like someone that he'd seen in the concentration camp, because I was usually very nice and round, but somehow my immune system got run down. We had a new baby in the family, and daughter had a car accident, and I kept running back and forth and not sleeping very much, and so I just gradually, and when I ate fruit, I would break out terribly. And when I went to Charlotte's Gerson Institute, instead of giving me orange juice, they gave me watermelon juice because I was allergic to orange juice.
Yes, we deal with special individual problems, and you know, whether it's any special functions or allergies, makes no difference. We can deal with it.
And I met a man there who had black legs that they wanted to amputate from Canada. His legs were pink like a baby's. They'd used a German ozone treatment on his legs. Everybody got such individual treatment, and when I went there for 1 week, I ended up staying 3 weeks because the food was so delicious, and it was just incredible. I knew I could never get such organic, wonderful food anywhere else. And so that was it. I mean, that was my recovery, just 3 weeks there, and then going home. And over the years, I've seen, there was a lady from Canada that was given up by the Canadian government. I think they have a reciprocal policy there, and she saw a tape, and she came through a neighbor, and her liver was so metastasized that they'd given up in Canada. And in 10 days that I was down visiting at the Gerson Institute, in 10 days her liver picture came back, changed. I mean, you just see miracles like that. I mean, it's just incredible. And I'm so glad that Charlotte and Norman are going all over the country, because this word of mouth is the only way that you can really, because your neighbors. I've taught kindergarten, I've seen little children die of cancer. It's so unnecessary. I mean, if everybody just tells somebody else, it's just so easy and so simple. So,
thank you very much, Rose. I really appreciate your coming. Thank you. All right.
If I live to July 1st, it's 46 years since I had the treatment from Dr. Gerson. I had melanoma in the ankle. I had 2 operations on my ankle of my left leg, and then it went into the upper muscle to the inside of the leg and into the lymph glands. And I was operated on for that. So totally I have had 3 operations for melanoma sarcoma. And then from that, I went to Dr. Gerson. I heard of Dr. Gerson through a friend of mine who lived in Alabama. She had heard the broadcast that Graham Swing did. And she called New York. I was in the New York hospital, and told us about Gerson, and I went to him. That was September of 1946. And I was on the diet 3 years. The second year, I was so healthy, I became pregnant. And Dr. Gerson was delighted. I believe that I'm the first patient that had had cancer that also got pregnant. And what he told me was, he knew by that fact that I was well. And I had a baby girl. She is now 42, and she has always been healthy. But I'm getting her this next week to come to the Gerson Clinic for a checkup, which is what I'm doing. I came with my daughter-in-law, but I also had a checkup, and everything's working fine. They gave me 3 to 6 months, and by doing something as simple as eating the food and drinking the juice and taking the medicines that would bring about a chemical balance of the cells, anyone can get well. But so many people that I've known through the years will start the diet, but they want to have a little of this and a little of that, and it doesn't work that way. But it worked with me because I didn't vary.
And it was very remarkable that there's a glow of health about them. And you do want to remember that a whole number of them had cancer and were dying. And others have other diseases and were told either there was no help for them or that they would die. It doesn't have to be. There are other diseases that'll kill you. It doesn't have to be cancer. Ed had a small mole on the back of his neck for many years, and in '54 it started to grow and was removed. Biopsied melanoma. And it had metastasized. And the surgeon recommended a radical neck dissection. Now, do you know what a radical neck dissection is? They take a whole part of the neck and some of the arteries and the muscles and all of this out, really mutilating. It looks like you have only half a neck left. You do function, but it is no help. In almost every case of melanoma, you get a radical neck dissection, that's great. Then it comes up somewhere else. We have one patient, I don't think he's here, he's described also in the book, who had one of these radical neck dissections, and within 5 months, just for your information, the whole area of the surgery and the scar tissue was full of new melanoma. Cutting out a piece does not help, as you are now aware of from my previous lecture, does not help. So Ed very wisely refused. He also had glands already swollen under both armpits and in his groin, so he came to Dr. Gerson in New York. And after very few days, was it about a week or so, most of the lumps and bumps had disappeared. About 7 days, Ed says. It's interesting that particularly with melanoma, which is a very, very violent, highly malignant type of cancer, we have some of our best results. The body most rapidly recognizes these foreign tissues as malignant, digests them, gets rid of them, and the body recovers. You'll see other melanoma patients here. Now Ed, about 7 months after he was on the therapy, he was taking a niacin, which is part of the therapy, and he got a heavy flush, an unusually heavy niacin flush. You know, when the face sort of prickles and the ears get red and you get a little prickly on the top of your body. It's just vitamin B3, that's all it is, and it helps open the capillaries, which is the idea. Well, Ed got one of these niacin flushes, was just before Christmas, and he was quite convinced that he had gotten a divine healing. And he went off the therapy. And his body was not yet healed. So after 1 month, he started to get a new tumor on his right breast. Another month, it had grown larger, and he could no longer stand a jacket on it. It was hurting. Another month was close to Easter. He couldn't even put a shirt on anymore. He was in pain. Called Dr. Gerson in New York. What did Dr. Gerson say?
He said, I will send you a letter telling you what to do, but immediately go back on the original therapy. And I did that. He said there will be pain for about a week in your, it was right in my right nipple, this recurrence. It was almost about 10 months after I had had the first excision of a lymph node in my neck. And so he said, go back, and in about 7 days your pain will stop, but you'll always have scar tissue in your nipple. Well, I happen to have a responsive system, and I had no pain about the second day, and my nipple is very soft, never has had any scar tissue.
Wonderful. Okay, so that time then, Ed stayed on the therapy as he was supposed to, the full time. And then he went off the therapy. Now he eats quite regularly, quite normally. He eats out in restaurants, he eats otherwise. And as you see, how many years later is it now?
27.
27 years later, he is fine. Thank you for coming. And since we are on the subject of melanoma, we have this very lovely young lady here, Debbie Dole. Come on up, Debbie, will you? And where's your picture, do you know? Debbie, who is now 29.
27.
Sorry about that.
Aging me.
Oh, dear, she's 27. All right. Debbie led a pretty poor lifestyle for a while. She was a waitress in a restaurant, and she had access to lots of drinks. She was drinking tequilas, was it?
Tequila.
Tequilas. It's not only alcohol, that's salt around the edge. That's pretty bad. She was smoking. She was drinking a lot of coffee and eating not very good foods. Anyway, about 3 years ago, right? It was 3 years ago? She had a first tumor, melanoma, on her arm. They cut out the tumor, diagnosed it, and found it was melanoma. So then they did a deep excision. You know, they really cut. They scraped down to what, nearly the bone, not quite. And they said, we got it all. Did they tell you that? They got it all. And how long did it take till it came back?
6 months.
6 months. She had a new one under her arm. They wanted to cut again. Cut it out. Cut and cut and cut. Well, she said, wait a minute. I had an operation. I already cut it out. They already told me it was all gone. How come it came back? And what do you expect when another operation? And she refused. And she came instead to the Gerson Clinic. That was how long ago?
In August of 78.
In August of 78, so that's 3 months and roughly 3 years and roughly 2 months. The tumor went down and disappeared. How long did that take?
A month.
Took about a month. You see, it already takes a little longer than it used to take in my father's days. Because people are more toxic, more damaged. It takes a little longer. But in a month, melanoma tumor had disappeared. And Debbie stayed very close to the therapy for a year and a half. Is she still staying close to the right food? She still drinks some of the juices. She still takes good care of herself, and she remains well. No new tumors. She's well, she's active, she lives in the Bay Area, and she does help other people there when they're interested in going on the therapy to find sources for foods and vegetables. She is lovely and helpful and wanting to help others, I guess partially in gratitude for her healing. We have another lady here now by the name of Rosamond Ray, who, where is Rosamond? She had a malignant polyp in 1953 in the intestinal tract. She had blood in her stool, she had pain, weakness, and they had a rectal surgery at Stanford University Medical School, did the biopsy. Now this is something I'd like to stress. We never do our own biopsies. We have been accused of lying and cheating and falsifying and quackery. We never do our own biopsies for that reason. Patients always come with a biopsy already, from Stanford, all the way from Stanford to Boston General, all the way from Mayo to MD Anderson's. They are not our word. They are the word of the top authorities, that these patients do indeed have the disease that they claim to have, that are diagnosed by the orthodox institutions, their own records, not ours. And it was a malignant polyp, 13 centimeters up from the rectum. The doctor said that without a colostomy, she had less than 10% chance for survival. She went to Dr. Gerson's New York clinic in October of 1953. She got married in 1955, and here she is, 28 years later. Do you have any words for us?
Oh, yes. Actually,
Not too much.
thank you. Actually, I nearly bled to death because the cancer really ate through into a blood vessel, and the blood just poured out of me. So I really had got into a real emergency, and that's what made them do the diagnosis, although I'd been having bleeding for quite a long time. But it was wonderful the way I healed up. You know, I would have examinations month after month while I was on the Gerson diet, and it got till the doctors couldn't even find a scar in my colon as to where the cancer had been. It was really wonderful. And furthermore, I had always had terrible migraine headaches, and Dr. Gerson told me, he said, you'll never have a headache on this diet, and you'll never have a cold. And it was true. That's the way it was, too.
Now, I'd like to introduce you to another very charming young lady, Diana Powell, who had severe rheumatoid arthritis. She was virtually wheelchair-bound. She was stiff and swollen in all her joints. It started in 1970. Come here, Diana. I'd like to have her at the end of the stage to just show you how she walks. When she came to us, she was like this.
She loves to show this.
All right? All her joints swollen, stiff, her knees, her legs, her ankles, her arms, her elbows, her wrists. And on top of that, she was in severe pain, on lots of aspirins. How many?
30 a day.
30 a day.
Just for the swelling, not for the pain.
Not for the pain. It didn't really help with the pain. All right. Now, you know that aspirins cause other problems. She had hypoglycemia. She had anemia. What else did you have?
Heart palpitations, you know, that aspirin poisoning, so at night you could hear the ringing at night.
Labored breathing, and she had all kinds of difficulties. She started with the therapy in May of '78. In 6 weeks, most of the pain was gone. Most of the lumps began to dissolve. She started to get some movements in her wrists. Her wrists are not yet totally well. Her fingers are now mostly straight. She has much better circulation. You still have a problem with hypoglycemia?
No.
Or any of the other problems?
I have occasionally, if you know, I have too much honey or something like that, but basically no, and I know how to straighten myself out most of the time.
Heart palpitations?
No.
No, all of that is gone.
All of that's gone.
Okay. Her lungs are clear of mucus. She has good energy, and she went water skiing.
Yes, this summer.
Okay, that's what we want to talk about when we talk about healing, that people go back to normal life while she was facing the wheelchair and, as she said, felt like she was a prisoner in her own body. We have a gentleman now by the name of William Wipf. That's a German name, isn't it, Bill? All right, come on over here. You are now 82?
82 is right.
82, wow.
Last August.
Last August. He had prostate cancer and what metastasized to his bones in December of 1976. Who did the diagnosis?
I had a medical doctor take care of that.
Medical doctor. That was where?
Urology at El Paso.
In El Paso, Texas.
Right.
William came all the way from El Paso. He had difficulty in urinating. He was hospitalized in March of '77, and he had prostate cancer diagnosed. Was biopsied?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And he had bilateral lymph node involvement, and he had a lymph node dissection, followed by 38 cobalt treatments in April, May of '77. Then a bone scan in June of '78 showed metastases in the bones, the left lower ribs. In other words, of course, radiation does not heal cancer. It spread to the lymph nodes. And then they removed his testicles, which is supposed to reduce the hormone involvement, and which is nonsense too. It really does not cure cancer, especially not bone cancer. He started the Gerson therapy in September of '79, and a bone scan in March of '81 showed no cancer anywhere in his bones. How do you feel now, Bill?
Excellent. Can't repeat. Thanks.
All right. Are you working?
Well, I'm very active, I'll say that. Many of the organizations I belong to, work at my church and other places. I can do anything I want to do. I just installed a solar system in my home.
Wow. Wonderful.
So
Thank you very, very much for
I
coming.
appreciate a lot the fine services I got at the hospital here.
Bill was at the La Gloria Hospital in Mexico under the care of the Mexican doctors with the Gerson therapy, and he
Oh, yes.
he got help there. He got well. That's the main thing.
Right. Thank you a lot.
Miss Donnelly? Miss Donnelly? Is Donnelly still here? Oh, yes. Okay, now I'd like to continue to be...
I am permanently on the Gerson therapy. I only eat organically grown fruits and vegetables. I eat, of course, no meats and fish and cheese and chicken and eggs. I drink the very juices that all the patients get, and I have the machine and I make juices, all from organic foods. I don't eat other foods because if I do, I'm sick. I get migraine headaches, and why should I bother? Okay, now let me give you a little bit more information about migraine headaches. They're so interesting. My daughter-in-law, who has had a couple of bouts with cancer before she met my son and married, my daughter-in-law, when she found out about this therapy, was delighted. For years she'd been searching for something to keep from having recurrence again with cancer. So she is very much into all of the things, including coffee enemas. She is also a physical therapist. She does massage therapy. And one of her clients lives just down the road from her in Carmel, and she comes regularly every week or other week for her massages, but she has a terrible problem with migraine headaches. So one day, my daughter-in-law takes her courage between her two hands and says, "You really want to get rid of your migraine headaches?" "Oh, yes." "Well, the answer is coffee enemas." "Oh, coffee enemas, what are you talking about? That's terrible, that's nonsense, that's disgusting, no way." All right. She never said another word again. And the lady kept coming back for her massages every week, every other week, for a year. Until one day, she calls up my daughter-in-law and says, "I am absolutely miserable. I cannot survive this way. I want to die. I can't stand this any longer. None of the drugs I'm taking is working. I'm just so miserable. I want to die. I'll do anything." So my daughter-in-law says, "Anything?" She says, "Anything." "Okay, come on over. I'll help you." She comes over to the house. My daughter-in-law fixes her coffee enema, puts it up in the bathroom, tells her what to do with it, closes the door, and leaves. Okay? You take the coffee, you lie on your right side, and you let it absorb. If you can, you hold it about 10, 12 minutes, and you expel it, okay? 20 minutes later, the lady comes out of the bathroom. She says, "It's a miracle. I'm free of pain. My headache's gone." Okay? In other words, the toxins are removed. The liver has been cleared. The toxins are removed. The body functions. The pain is gone. We see the same in cancer patients. They come in on morphine, on codeine, on scopolamine, on all these heavy drugs. And usually within 2-3 days, with the right food, the potassium and the coffee enemas, the pain is gone. Then we had another interesting case right here in City of Industry. A man from Lebanon. He has a very elegant men's fashion store. I get a call out of the blue, never met the man. He says, "You know, I want to thank you. It's such a wonderful thing. For 10.5 years, I've had hives. I have gone to every kind of doctor, and he had plenty of money. I have been to every kind of doctor and university clinic and dermatologist and specialist, and I've been treated with painkillers and psychic drugs, and they think I'm crazy, and they have given me prednisone and sleeping pills, and nothing works. This is driving me absolutely crazy. The hives, I'm itching, and I can't sleep, and it's horrible." And he says, "I finally ran across Dr. Gerson's book, and I took one coffee enema, and I was free of itching and hives for 12 hours. So he says, I took another coffee enema the next day, And I was again free for 12 hours. So he wasn't stupid. It's okay. I take two, one in the morning and one in the evening. I'm free for 24 hours. No more hives. So what were these hives? The coffee enemas help to detoxify the liver. The liver is able to release poisons and the hives go away. So what are the hives being caused? By toxins. Okay? So you can relieve a lot of relatively minor problems with detoxifying the body. Now, I don't ever want you to say or repeat or state that coffee enemas cure cancer or cure anything. They do not. Coffee enemas relieve the body of toxins and of the symptoms caused by toxins. Okay? They are extremely important, essential as part of the full treatment. But in some cases where there's mainly a toxic damage problem, they can relieve the symptoms, okay? Now be very careful. I did not say coffee enemas cure anything. I've been accused of saying that. I do not, okay? That would be quite foolish. I always have to re-stress that the Gerson therapy works as a total approach to the entire biochemical system that's the human body. The immune system, the enzyme system, the hormone system, the mineral balances, every part of the body needs to be put back into balance and into function. And the coffee enemas are essential to removing toxins so that one can do that. But they are not in themselves a cure. Okay? Now, unless there's anybody else who wants to talk about recovering on the Gerson therapy, I will open the meeting to questions. Yes. Very good question. The lady asked why drinking coffee is not good for you. What is the difference using it rectally versus drinking it? All right? Drinking coffee, first of all, coffee has acids. And it upsets the stomach. And coffee causes capillary spasms. And it causes rise in blood pressure when taken by mouth and through the stomach, okay? The acids of the coffee do nothing to the colon, no problem. You never have any stomach problem due to acids. Okay, the problem of the capillary spasming doesn't happen either. The caffeine simply travels to the bile ducts and helps to open them. Now there is one researcher by the name of Jerry, I can't remember his last name right now, who, in order to prove that, he swallowed a tube, got it past the stomach with releasing it through the, the reflex, got it past the stomach to watch what was happening at the bile ducts when he was drinking coffee. He drank the coffee, and he could see the ducts spasming over and soaping over and doing just the opposite of what they were supposed to do. Then he put the caffeine into the rectum with this tube still in place, and he could see where these same ducts were now opening up and allowing the bile to flow. So it does apparently just the opposite, and I can't exactly tell you why, but it's been observed, it's been studied in animal experiments also at the University of Göttingen in Germany. And it is definitely the way it works. Okay?
How long would you need to do coffee enemas after you have shown you're free of disease for maintenance? Would you need to?
That's a good question. The question is, how long would you do coffee enemas after you feel you're recovered and you're well? We go into the coffee enema problem in the workshop a lot more in detail later as far as treating patients and so on. In the beginning, you need to get rid of accumulated toxins from years and years of wrong eating. So at that time, you do need to take coffee enemas. However, you have to always balance the coffee enemas with the juices, because the coffee enemas will tend to wash out certain minerals from the colon. You've got to replace them with the juices. Now, in the very seriously ill, very highly toxic cancer patients, we give as many as 5 coffee enemas a day to relieve the liver. You can't do that unless the patients drink at least 10 or 12 juices a day. to replenish and replace the minerals so that the electrolytes don't go out of balance. Okay, so that's not a simple question. It has to, again, be balanced. You have to know what you're doing. Now, once the patient is recovered, then what does it mean recovered? I call healing restoring all the essential organ systems, which means once the liver and the whole digestive tract is recovered and restored, now the liver can take on again the part of detoxifying. That's part of its function. And when it is capable of doing that, and you're not overloading your body with new toxins all the time, if you continue to eat decent, clean, reasonable, organic food, then essentially your liver ought to function well enough, and you should have at least one good bowel movement a day. Now, for instance, in this book, Jackie Davison, who had, as I said, hundreds of tumors, she was extremely toxic. Sometimes she was awake during the night taking an enema every 2 hours because she was so poisoned. She had been constipated all her life. As a teenager, she was constipated. And after hundreds, probably thousands of enemas, by the time she was clean and her body was clear of melanoma, when she finally weaned herself off the coffee enemas, she had 2 normal bowel movements a day, which she had never ever had. So for one thing, you don't get used to them, it's not habit forming. For another, when the organ systems are really restored, you have good normal bowel function. Essentially, you no longer need the coffee enemas, except if for some reason you are not moving your bowel. Dr. GERSON said never let the sun set on a day when you didn't move your bowel. Take an enema. Okay? You've got to move your bowel every day. Contrary to what a lot of doctors say. Sometimes you might go to a doctor and they might say, okay, I haven't had any bowel movement in 3 days, and why am I so constipated? The doctor said, maybe that's your pattern and don't worry about it and don't take anything. That's wrong. It's wrong. Because the toxins in the intestinal tract are reabsorbed. They go back into the system. You get poisoned. It's wrong. Okay? So Dr. GERSON said, don't let the sun set on a day when you haven't moved your bowel. So if you're fully well and you feel well and everything is fine, you're well into the therapy, but you're not moving your bowel, take an enema. Okay?
Now, how about taking colonics?
Dr. GERSON said in the book, just where he describes how to do coffee enemas, just below the heading that says enema, in very large fat letters, he says no high colonics. Now why? All of this is very important to our later discussion of enemas. High colonics force the water all the way up toward the top of the intestinal tract. Okay, let's just review the intestinal tract. It starts, the large intestine starts at the point of the appendix, where the small intestine goes into the large, where the appendix is. There's a valve, the ileocecal valve, which keeps, once the material has gone into the large intestine, it can't go back. It keeps it from back flowing, okay? Now, at that valve, you start your large intestine, and it goes up toward the liver, where you have the hepatic flexure, which is where it bends at the liver, goes over toward the spleen, where you have your splenic flexure, in other words, the bend, the corner of the spleen. Then it goes down and goes into the sigmoid. It makes sort of an S curve, so it's called the sigmoid colon, into the rectum, and then, of course, that's where it's collected, and you defecate. All right. If you force water all the way into the top of the intestinal, the large intestine, you wash out everything. Now, what is the function of the large intestine? Most people don't know what the large intestine does. When the digested food mass goes through the small intestine, first of all, the body has used a lot of digestive enzymes. There's fluid mixed in with it so that it passes easily. And then this digested food mass with the nutrients, the minerals, the vitamins, the enzymes, the carbohydrates, the proteins, and so on, have to go through the intestinal wall of the small intestine to go into the bloodstream. Why do you eat? So the nutrients go into the bloodstream and get carried all over to every cell in your body. Okay? So that happens in the small intestine. Now the digested mass from the small intestine, still containing a lot of fluid, still containing a lot of minerals and certain enzymes and some vitamins, they go into the large intestine. There you have the friendly bacteria. They also contribute by actually producing additional vitamins, okay? Now, the large intestine has a job, very interesting, of recycling. It reabsorbs some of the minerals, the enzymes, the fluids, and the vitamins that are still available in the colon and sends it back to the liver for further need and further use, okay? Now, when you do the high colonics, you wash it all out, everything, including the nutrients that should be reabsorbed. Furthermore, when you push it all the way up there, the caffeine has to be absorbed in the lower colon at the hemorrhoidal vein to go into the portal system. When you push it all the way up there, it doesn't help. It doesn't do a thing for the liver. We are not moving bowel. We are detoxifying the liver. We get people saying, but I have a normal bowel movement. I have 2 normal bowel movements a day. Why do I need enemas? Well, we are not looking for bowel movements. We are looking to open the bile ducts and detoxify the liver. Well, the high colonics don't do that, and they can cause trouble. So Dr. Gerson says, no high colonics.
How about female hormones for osteoporosis?
How about female hormones for osteoporosis? Is it curing it? No way. Osteoporosis, what's the cause of osteoporosis? Meat eating and milk and cheese. These products are very high in phosphorus, and for the body to balance it, it needs calcium. And the calcium you take in pills doesn't work. So it takes the calcium out of the bones. So the first thing you want to do is stop eating meat and drinking milk, the very things the doctors give you. Drink lots of milk. Okay? It will not work. All right? But not eating meat and not drinking milk, then getting your calcium in the proper sources. What's the best source of calcium? Green leaves, the green juices, the carrot juices. And you see, that's another thing too. It's always a mistake to take a mono food. Meaning, if you feel you need vitamin C, you take a pill of vitamin C. It's a mistake. If you feel you need calcium, you take a pill with calcium. The body can't deal with a mono food. Nowhere in nature comes food in a single substance. The food, the calcium has to come together with other minerals, with enzymes to lodge it in the bones, with the oxidizing materials, and clear of fats, and especially the stomach has to have acid. So when you read or you see ads for antacids, all right? Thank you. You eat ads for antacids, and oh yes, it'll do you good. Besides, it has calcium. Absolutely useless, because the calcium that you are going to get into your bones require acid in the stomach. And the antacid makes it completely indigestible and unassimilable. It's useless. On the contrary, it causes trouble because the antacids contain aluminum, and aluminum causes Alzheimer's, and it blocks enzymes and causes all kinds of other problems. When you have adequate potassium in your system and you don't take too many animal products and you don't take sodium, the anti-enzyme, then your acid works. Now we do, in the beginning, we do have to supplement our patients with stomach acid, with Acidol and Pepsin. But I never take it, and I have no osteoporosis. And I take no calcium, and I take no hormones. I drink juices and I don't eat meat.
Is it a good idea to have, say, a CAT scan or MRI to find if there are any other tumors?
Well, you mean after you're cured or in the beginning?
Well,
Okay, we are generally much more relaxed about MRIs because it doesn't do damage like CAT scans. CAT scan is radiation, and they have to usually use dyes or other contrasting agents that are not good to pump into the body. MRIs are relatively safe. So if that particular cancer can be diagnosed with MRIs, which isn't always possible, then it's preferable.